Welcome back to Stories Aloud, where every story echoes with the pulse of being human. Today we step into Martyr by Kaveh Akbar, a novel that feels like poetry cracked open, spilling truth, pain, longing, and wild beauty. This is a story about an immigrant soul searching for meaning, a recovering addict learning how to live, and a son trying to understand a mother he never truly knew. Settle in. This one will move through the mind, but live in the heart.
This material is it's so intense. We're charting the really volatile existence of this man, Cyrus Shams, and his entire life is basically defined by this desperate, all-consuming need to make his existence, and specifically his death, mean something huge.
Absolutely. And we're navigating this really fractured landscape of who he is. We're trying to trace the lines from, AA meetings in the Midwest all the way to this massive, painful family secret that's rooted in a devastating geopolitical tragedy.
It's a huge canvas.
It is. So our mission in this intensive session is really to synthesize Cyrus's chaotic world and try to unravel this meaning that he's searching for. We're hoping to understand that grace. Well, grace is often unearned, and sometimes the deepest, most life-altering clarity is hidden.
It's hidden behind this carefully built facade of absence and death. And, the information overload in Cyrus's life, it really mirrors the world we all live in now. He's constantly trying to edit his own narrative to control it.
Right.
So for you listening, the key question we're going to keep coming back to is this. In a world with so much noise, so much information coming at you, how do you actually distinguish the manufactured meaning, the stories we tell ourselves about being a hero or about our suffering, from that genuine life-altering clarity that actually saves you?
That's the core of it. So let's get into the material.
Let's do it.
We have to start in the American Midwest with Cyrus Shams, just to understand the architecture of his existence before any of this unravels. Mm-hmm. His life was really defined by this specific, almost carefully built chemical equilibrium.
Mm-hmm. Even if the environment itself was just chaos.
Exactly. The description of his living space, his mattress and his bedroom smelling like piss and Febreze, it's immediately visceral.
Oh, it is. It's the scent of a cover-up, isn't it? It's that cheap attempt to mask something profoundly wrong, something shameful.
Yeah, decay.
And when you look at the actual substance use, it wasn't just one thing. It wasn't a singular vice. It was this complex, self-medicating, a bouquet he designed to manage every possible state of being.
Right. He cycles through everything. You have the depressants and the stimulants, so there's booze, weed, cigarettes, just for routine.
And then the Klonopin to kind of smooth out the edges, the Adderall to function, Percocets for that deep, numb relief. And this whole cocktail, this whole approach, it was so heavily influenced by his late father, Ali.
Ali's rationalization of his own drinking is just.
Yeah.
It's profoundly sad. Here's this immigrant working these brutal hours, getting up at 4:30 a.m. for the chicken farm.
Yeah.
And he saw his nightly gin not as a weakness, but as a controlled pharmaceutical necessity, a discipline almost.
Exactly. He needed it not for pleasure, but just to force himself to sleep so he could function the next day. And this is where the cultural distinction he makes becomes so chilling.
Tell us about that.
Ali explicitly taught Cyrus that low people drank because they lacked imagination or drive.
Wow.
So this framework, it allowed Cyrus, who saw himself as this poet, this intellectual, to frame his own sprawling polydrug use as something sophisticated, like it was a form of self-care. He even called it life's invincibility cheat code.
So he thought he was optimizing his existence, not drowning in it.
He was sharpening his edges, or so he told himself.
That reframing, turning dependence into a kind of discipline, that must have made getting sober so incredibly difficult, because it's not just challenging your habits, it's challenging your whole identity, your idea of yourself as being superior.
100%. He wasn't one of those low people, so why was this happening to him? But, of course, the body doesn't negotiate with philosophy, right? Even in his early sobriety, the physical toll is just intense. His night terrors come back, and the way he describes them, it's so poetic and haunting. He calls it the warbler wraith.
It shows that the psychological foundation is still just completely fractured.
And the shame comes back in these really physical ways, waking up wet, and having to clean up the mess with exasperated resolve. That phrase, exasperated resolve, it just perfectly captures the Sisyphean task of cleaning up a life that just keeps betraying you.
It really does. It speaks to that utter lack of dignity that addiction just forces on you.
Yeah.
And, we often look for that big dramatic moment, the rock bottom. But the sources really emphasize that Cyrus's turning point was Well, it was remarkably quiet.
Yes, and this is such a crucial concept in recovery stories, what the source calls the iron law of sobriety. It completely defies that Hollywood trope of the cinematic public rock bottom.
What was it for him?
For Cyrus, the clarity didn't come through drama. It happened calmly. The moment described is so brief. During this period of intense drunkenness, he was just overcome with this suicidal urge to burn down his entire apartment complex.
Just to facilitate his own death in the bathtub.
Right, a fiery death. But in that moment, he realized he didn't want to destroy other people in his own self-destruction. And that flicker, that tiny connection to the outside world, that momentary recognition that other people exist, that was the pivot.
It's just more proof that recovery is so profoundly personal. It's an internal shift, not some external spectacle for everyone to watch.
Exactly.
And that focus on performance, on a kind of controlled self-destruction, it leads us right to his job, which is almost too perfect for someone so obsessed with the meaning of death.
It really is. He's employed as a standardized patient at Keedy University, so he's simulating crisis and dying for medical students.
For $20 an hour, which, as the source notes, is a big upgrade from selling his plasma.
Yeah, and that plasma detail, it just adds this necessary texture, doesn't it? He used to do it all the time when he was drinking, and he notes how his dehydrated, hungover blood would take hours to, and I quote, sludge out like milkshake through a thin straw. So now he's selling his emotional labor instead of his blood, but the currency is still his own suffering. And his roles, they require him to cycle through this immense pain and fear, but all while keeping this emotional distance.
Let's talk about the sheer range of roles he plays, because it really illustrates the artificiality of it all. He has to be Sally Gutierrez, a grieving mother from a car accident.
Buck Stapleton, a devout Catholic who's debating organ donation.
Daisy Van Bogert, a diabetic facing an amputation. And Sandra Kaufman, a high school teacher who has severe brain masses and is managing her pain at a scale 6.
That scale 6 is so telling, and these roles, they're designed to test the student's empathy and their clinical bedside manner, which is then judged by this rigid, quantifiable score sheet. He's being filmed by a camera on a tripod.
It's a completely sterile environment where any genuine human connection is just replaced by assessment metrics.
Totally, and the students, they either respond with this overeager, suffocating kind of consolation, or they have this, like, clinical repulsion where they just fall back on memorized platitudes. It just highlights this huge, awkward gulf between learning from a textbook and dealing with actual human tragedy.
The irony is just so potent, isn't it? Cyrus is desperately trying to engineer this meaningful, dramatic death for himself, yet his job is to perform meaningless, scripted suffering for $20 an hour using an artificial pain scale.
The job is a constant, subtle mockery of his entire life's ambition.
And his friend, Z, sees the danger right away. Z sees that this constant emotional mimicry is just, it's destructive.
Z has that piercing critique saying, your brain doesn't know the difference between acting and living. It can't be like, good for you. Z gets that the performance of pain is functionally the same as real trauma for Cyrus's very fragile psyche.
And the boundary gets violently crossed during his role as Sandra Kaufman, the teacher with the brain masses.
Yes. When the medical student, Dr. Montfort, uses all this clinical jargon, Cyrus he breaks character completely.
He stops being Sandra.
He starts being Sandra, and he forces Montfort into a real terrifying interaction about death. He demands to know if she's ever had a patient who wanted to die.
And in that moment, he's revealing his own internal existential horror.
He points to his throat and asks her if she has a doom organ that just pulses all the time, pulses dread every day, obstinately. He's using the character as a Trojan horse to deliver his own core, unmanageable dread. It's a breathtaking moment.
So how does Montfort, the student, will she react to this complete break in the script?
She immediately pathologizes him. She doesn't engage with the huge philosophical question he's just thrown at her. Instead, she suggests his desire to die might be a psychological comorbidity.
Wow. An anxiety disorder that can be treated.
Exactly. She's basically inviting him back into the script, replacing his existential terror with clinical jargon. And Cyrus, flush with embarrassment, he takes the invitation. He retreats back into the role where his pain is validated, even if it's fake. Because the alternative, that true, messy, unscripted confrontation, is just too terrifying.
This whole cycle of performance and real suffering, it sets the stage perfectly for his relationship with his AA sponsor, Gabe. It's this intensely necessary but also extremely fraught relationship.
Oh, absolutely. Gabe is essential because he provides accountability, but he does it with a brutal, unvarnished honesty that almost no one else dares to use with Cyrus.
Gabe is the truth teller. He's completely uninterested in, as the text says, rhetorical hygienics.
Exactly. And their confrontation at the secret stash coffee shop is so critical because it moves beyond just the addiction, and it focuses on Cyrus's performance of his identity. Gabe just immediately calls him out on his shtick.
The self-serious, exoticized poet shtick.
Yep. And Gabe's challenge on cultural authenticity is probably the most painful critique Cyrus gets in the whole story.
Let's re-examine that quote, because it's just devastating.
He challenges Cyrus's tendency to lean too heavily on this romanticized Persian identity in his poetry. He says, "You've probably spent more time looking at your phone today than you've spent cutting open pomegranates in your entire life, cumulatively."
Oof. It's brutal.
It is. He's suggesting Cyrus is using his heritage as a shield, as a performance, rather than genuinely living it.
And Cyrus's immediate internal reaction is just explosive. He wants to kick Gabe, he thinks he's a racist, but at the same time, he feels that sharp sting of truth. He acknowledges Gabe is a little right.
And this is exactly that double consciousness we see him reference later, right? That internal conflict between how you see yourself and how you know you're being perceived by the dominant culture.
Absolutely. Gabe isn't giving him any room to hide behind identity politics or his artistic pretensions. He's demanding immediate, radical honesty.
And that honesty leads directly to the core of Cyrus's delusion, his obsession with martyrdom. Gabe connects this desire for a definitive, spectacular ending to a really dangerous psychological state, the tyranny of certainty.
What does he say about certainty, specifically?
He argues that certainty is a disease. He connects it to worms in their brains that lead to zealotry and tyranny. He sees Cyrus's desire for this grand ending as just a secular version of fanaticism.
The need to know, absolutely, that your life was meaningful enough to justify everything.
Exactly. And this sets the stage for Cyrus to finally admit that he wants his death to matter more than his parents' deaths.
So if certainty is the enemy, Cyrus's only path to meaning must be through some kind of uncertain pacifist action. Which brings us to his whole Earth Martyrs project.
Right, but Gabe does not let him off the hook gently, not at all. He challenges his basic competence for such a grand ambition.
What does he say?
When Cyrus admits he wants to die, Gabe just responds with that cutting question, "You want to be a martyr?" And then he follows up with the brutal, pragmatic reality check. "Cyrus, you can't even wash your own dirty clothes. You think you're going to be able to strap a bomb to your chest and walk into a cafe?"
The word bomb makes Cyrus just wince, right? He accuses Gabe of being racist.
He does, but Gabe just comes back with, "Am I wrong?" And Cyrus has to clarify. No, he doesn't mean that kind of martyr. He says he envies the conviction, the clarity of faith, but that he himself is not that certain of anything. I'm not that certain of gravity.
And that entire argument, that's the engine of the whole story, isn't it? This desperate, intellectual search for a meaning that his messy, chemical-dependent life has totally failed to provide.
100%.
So Cyrus's entire adult life is driven by this corrective ambition. He has to transcend what he sees as the meaninglessness of his family's deaths.
Right. His mother, Roya, was just a rounding error in a geopolitical tragedy, and his father, Ali, died anonymous after decades of this grinding, unremarkable labor. Cyrus needs a monumental closure. He needs a different ending.
And he tries to intellectualize this obsession through his book project on secular pacifist martyrs. He calls them Earth Martyrs.
Yeah, he's trying to create a category for heroic death that requires agency, but not violence. And the figures he researches are so telling.
Like who?
Hypatia Alexandria, the female philosopher and astronomer who was killed by a Christian mob. Emily Wilding Davison, the suffragette who threw herself in front of the king's horse.
And the lone protester who stopped the tanks in Tiananmen Square.
Exactly. These are all people who used their body, not a weapon, to make a profound statement.
But the internal conflict of the project for him is that he believes true sacrifice has to involve pulling yourself out of a life that's actually worth living.
Yes, that's the core struggle.
Yeah.
He tries to define true sacrifice as having to lift yourself out of a life you enjoyed, the tea still warm, the honey still sweet.
So if his life is already miserable, if he's constantly struggling with addiction and self-pity, does his death even count?
That's his fear. He's terrified that the very act of fantasizing about his own dramatic demise, this constant longing for a glorious ending, it might void his right to be considered a martyr at all. He worries it's just self-elegizing.
And layered on top of all of that, he's hyper-aware that any grand gesture he makes would immediately be corrupted by the empire, by the West. He just can't escape that geopolitical lens.
This is where we have to unpack W.E.B. Du Bois' concept of double consciousness, which Cyrus explicitly uses to filter his own actions.
For anyone listening who might not be familiar, what does that mean?
It's that internal conflict that marginalized people experience. You're viewing yourself through your own lens, but at the same time, you're also seeing yourself through the distorted, prejudiced lens of the dominant white society. You're always seeing two versions of yourself.
So how does that apply to his martyrdom fantasy specifically?
He knows that if he were to die trying to, say, stop a tyrannical dictator, even in a pacifist act, the Western media narrative wouldn't celebrate him as some principled leftist intellectual.
No, they would fall back on prejudice.
Immediately. The headline would be, "An Iranian terrorist attempted a state assassination." The act would be instantly diminished, weaponized, and it would destroy the very purity of meaning he's seeking. So he's stuck. His life feels miserable, and he knows his death will be misinterpreted.
And this intense pressure cooker of identity and existential dread is, of course, all tied back to the foundational trauma of his family, the downing of Iran Air Flight 655.
This event is the original sin of the story. It's the massive void at the center of Cyrus's entire existence. In 1988, Iran Air Flight 655 was, and this is a quote, shot out of the sky like a goose by the USS Vincennes, a U.S. Navy missile cruiser.
290 people were killed, 66 children. They were just reduced to dust.
The horror of it is just compounded by the sheer cosmic irony of Cyrus's own survival. His mother, Roya, died on that plane, but he survived only because she decided he was too young to fly that day. She just wanted a brief rest from childcare.
And that single, seemingly small decision, it meant the difference between life and oblivion for him. It dictated the entire course of his father Ali's life for decades after.
Exactly. Ali moves to the American Midwest. He faces this constant grinding labor and resignation, and he's always aware that his life is basically just a consequence of state violence and random chance.
And then there's the financial legacy of that loss. The sources detail the U.S. government settlement, which becomes this constant source of moral contamination for Cyrus.
Yeah, it was this calculated transactional compensation, a bounty. The U.S. government paid $150,000 for women and children, but $300,000 for wage-earning men.
This hierarchy of value, the idea that a life dedicated to earning a wage was monetarily worth twice as much as a child or a mother, that just infuriated Cyrus.
He felt gross using that money for anything banal. He called it blood money. It was a constant reminder that his mother's death was quantifiable and ultimately dismissible by the dominant power structure.
Ali's life at the industrial chicken farm seems to reflect this deep, profound resignation to that injustice. He finds his solace in this small, controllable, highly artificial routine.
The chicken farm is such a potent metaphor for modern industrial life. Ali observed that the first thing they bred out of the chickens was their immune systems. They literally couldn't survive without constant intervention.
And that reflected his own state.
Perfectly. A man whose natural defenses against despair had been systematically eroded by trauma. He uses his gin as medicine, and he obsesses over these small, controllable joys, like that absurd big-mouth Billy Bass electronic fish he bought.
The sources bring in this fascinating detail here, connecting Ali's modern resignation all the way back to ancient history, the Sumerian copper complaint. This feels really important to unpack.
It's critical for understanding the universality of human pettiness. Ali remembers Cyrus showing him this 4,000-year-old Babylonian or Sumerian clay tablet. And it wasn't some great epic or religious text.
No, it was a complaint letter.
A long, detailed complaint from a business transaction about receiving substandard copper.
So what was Ali's profound takeaway from this incredibly specific ancient grievance?
He connected it directly to his own feeling of existential unfairness, the fact that his entire life was ruined by a missile, yet people were still sitting around arguing about bad commodities 4,000 years ago. He realized that for all our dizzying scientific advances, missiles that shoot down planes, industrial methods that breed 7-pound chickens in 35 days, our spiritual advancement is at zero.
We're still petty, self-pitying, and fundamentally rotten, obsessed with the unfairness of our copper delivery.
And that understanding defined Ali's stoic, difficult acceptance of his fate.
The geopolitical pain that took Cyrus's mother is then mirrored by the psychological devastation suffered by his maternal uncle, Arash Shirazi, who served in the Iran-Iraq War.
Arash is the living embodiment of fractured meaning. He is psychologically shattered, living in this constant state of fear and vivid hallucinatory memory. And his experience during the war was not that of a typical soldier. It was an exercise in manufactured meaning and psychological warfare, directed at his own side.
His job, his secret mission, is truly horrifying. It needs a detailed explanation.
Arash was tasked with riding a horse across battlefields at night. He had to wear a black cloak and, this is the crucial part, hold a flashlight directly under his face, creating this ghostly, terrifying illumination.
To make him look like an angel moving among the war dead and the dying.
Yes, and his mission was twofold. Primarily, it was to inspire the dying men, many of them just teenagers, to die with dignity, conviction. But the deeper, more critical purpose was to prevent them from committing suicide out of despair.
Because if they died by suicide, it would jeopardize their spiritual hereafter in the eyes of the regime. So he was forced to manage their spiritual well-being right up to the very point of death.
The contradictions Arash faced must have been unbearable for a man with, as the source says, only scattered belief. He was performing divine intervention without any actual conviction himself.
A human being forced to carry this impossible theological and psychological burden.
I mean, for example, he had to deny desperately dying men water, even as they begged, because an angel wouldn't be carrying water. He carried a fake two-fanged sword meant to look like Zulfikar, Ali's famous sword, as a prop.
He was deemed too important to fight. Yet he was forced to witness the ultimate despair of men who had been handed plastic keys to heaven and sent to the front lines.
It's so hard to process that level of engineered psychological trauma. The contradiction he faced, denying water to a dying man to save his soul's hereafter, it's paralyzing. Arash's trauma is the perfect physical manifestation of the kind of meaning Cyrus is trying to achieve. A glorious, purposeful death that's manufactured from sheer desperation and theater.
Arash is the living proof that a grand, meaningful death often requires profound, personal psychological damage. And that shadow of his uncle just hangs over Cyrus's entire project. It represents the true, messy cost of performative heroism.
And that search for a hero leads him to Brooklyn.
Right. Cyrus, still convinced that a true, pure martyrdom is possible, travels to Brooklyn to interview an artist named Orkideh.
And Orkideh is an Iranian artist who has turned her terminal cancer diagnosis into a final, powerful art installation. He sees her as his ideal, his living secular martyr.
The ultimate subject for his book.
Exactly. But Orkideh immediately challenges his simplistic, monolithic concept of the self. She suggests that this Western desire for a singular, flawless hero is a delusion. And she introduces this incredible metaphor of the Safavid explorer's mirrors.
Let's fully unpack that mirror metaphor because it's so central to her philosophy and to the entire story's theme of fragmented identity.
When these massive European mirrors were shipped to Isfahan for the Safavid palaces, many of them shattered during the long, arduous journey. But instead of discarding the pieces and demanding replacements, the Iranian architects used the fragments. They created the beautiful, complex Anakari mosaics you see in mosques and palaces.
So what's the implication of that? Of constructing beauty from broken pieces?
Orkideh suggests that by embracing the shattered fragments, Persians were training for a long time and sitting in the complicated multiplicities of ourselves. They accepted that the self isn't one perfect, reflecting surface. It's a million sharp, beautiful pieces fitted together.
Which is a direct rejection of the singular, perfect martyr Cyrus wants to be.
A total rejection. And Orkideh's art philosophy follows this same fragmented idea. She values what she calls comprehension density.
And what does she mean by that?
She defines it as the moment when communication is richest, when meaning is maximized, like in sex or in art. It's the absolute opposite of the superficial, quantifiable evaluation that Cyrus faces in his job every day. She believes art is a way to stay on Earth. It's what time doesn't ruin.
A piece of permanent meaning created from a fleeting existence.
Exactly. She is making her death an object of beauty, unlike the ugly, pointless death Cyrus believes his mother suffered.
And this whole philosophical discussion is really the calm before the storm. After Orkideh's death, the shocking truth is delivered by Sanglin Orkideh's gallerist, her friend, and her former wife. And this revelation just shatters Cyrus's entire foundational narrative.
This is the massive twist. Orkideh was Cyrus Shams. She was Cyrus's mother.
It was the ultimate calculated betrayal of her previous life. We need to detail the mechanism of the swap. How did she disappear?
Roya switched passports with her lover, a woman named Layla, to escape her suffocating life with Ali. The plan was for Roy to fly to Dubai on Layla's passport, and then Layla would meet her later.
And that's not what happened.
Tragically, Layla, who was fleeing her own difficult marriage, died in the plane crash in Roya's name. Roya then adopted the name Orkida, which was the name Ali had reserved for Cyrus if he had been born a girl, and she began her new life as an artist, living inside Layla's documents.
So Cyrus's entire identity, all his trauma, his whole martyrdom project, it was all built on a lie orchestrated by the very person he thought died as a victim of geopolitical violence.
And this is where we have to fully unpack Orkid Toroya's definition of unearned grace. She was a survivor by accident. She survived an event that should have killed her, which did kill the woman she loved, but which also gave her the freedom to live as her true self.
So what did that unearned survival mean to her? Did it make her more or less heroic in Cyrus's eyes?
Well, she interprets her survival as a kind of cosmic compensation, but without any of the baggage of righteousness. She wrote, "Wherever I go, I carry the grace of having lived after I died. I emerged from your own death to run away from your husband."
It's a completely transactional rejection of righteousness.
It is. She views grace as unearned. This survival, rooted in deceit and abandonment, is what provided her the agency to live authentically. To Cyrus, who is trying so hard to earn his meaning through suffering, this betrayal is just excruciating. But to Orkida, the true meaning came from seizing that unearned chance.
And the artistic connection is brought home when Cyrus realizes that Orkida's most famous painting, the one that launched her career,
It was a secret self-portrait of her own brother.
a painting of Arash in his angel war role, cloaked, flashlight under his chin, performing the divine among the dead.
The entire painful truth Cyrus was seeking, the trauma, the secret pain, the manufactured meaning, it was all hidden in plain sight, codified in the art that made his mother famous. She didn't just survive, she actively metabolized her family's trauma into art.
The story then drives home this rejection of the dramatic, cinematic death that Cyrus craves, and it does it through Orkida's appreciation of art, specifically her acquisition of Bruegel's landscape with the Fall of Icarus.
Yes, that painting is such a powerful counterpoint to Cyrus's entire philosophy.
The painting famously minimizes the tragedy, right? You have this massive mythological event, Icarus flying too close to the sun and falling to his death, but the painting focuses on the mundane, everyday reality surrounding it.
Exactly. Icarus is reduced to a pair of legs drowning in the water in the corner of the frame. The focus is on the world that just continues its routine, regardless of this spectacular individual downfall. The plowman plows, the mule plows, the sheep graze.
And the famous line attached to the painting, the one Orkida loved, it delivers the ultimate message of indifference.
It says, "The expensive, delicate ship that must have seen something amazing, a boy falling out of the sky, had somewhere to get to and sailed calmly on." This is the definitive rejection of Cyrus's desired magnificent death. There is no heroic ripple. Life just moves on. Your tragic downfall, even if it's mythological, is just background noise to a ship that has somewhere else to be.
But Sang complicates the narrative even further by revealing that Roya and Layla were lovers. So the passport swap wasn't just about escaping a bad marriage. It was about escaping an oppressive environment that denied their fundamental relationship.
Right, and when Cyrus reacts with this profound, almost privileged anger, calling it gay people dying for love, it's bullshit, Sang corrects his simplistic, romanticized view. She emphasizes that persecution and fear are absolutely not over at all, especially in a place like Iran.
And she offers this new definition of motivation, shifting from the idea of love conquers all to a much more pragmatic, darker truth.
Sang explains that fear isn't just paralyzing. It can be a dirty fuel that saves you and enables you to thrive. Her own experience leaving Vietnam, using the fear of going hungry to work constantly and protect her children, taught her the efficacy of harnessing anger and fear for survival.
So Orkida Roy didn't survive because of some grand love.
She survived because she was terrified enough of her old life to be ruthless. Fear was the engine of her unearned grace.
The weight of all this truth, that his mother orchestrated her death, was a lesbian, lived this successful life as an artist, basically making a mockery of his decades of grief, it causes a total collapse for Cyrus.
A complete collapse. He wakes up alone, he's wet the bed, and he just feels hopelessly embarrassed and furiously betrayed. The constructed meaning is all gone, and all that's left is this infantile shame.
And that feeling of humiliation, coupled with the betrayal, it immediately turns into outward hostility towards the person closest to him, Z. He weaponizes his existential ambition against his friend during this terrible fight.
He uses his great potential as a club, lashing out with, I actually want to make a difference. I want my having been alive to matter. He's basically telling Z that his friendship, their small life, it's insufficient, that Cyrus is destined for something higher.
Yeah, this is where Z's response just cuts through Cyrus's self-obsession with absolute surgical precision.
It's devastating. Z pulls the focus back to his own pain, which Cyrus has completely ignored for months. He says, Cyrus, for months, every song I've listened to has been directly about me. Do you have any idea what I'm even talking about?
And he's not speaking metaphorically. He's experiencing the narcissistic reality that Cyrus has created, where Cyrus's suffering has consumed all the oxygen in their relationship.
And that realization is just devastating for Cyrus. He is shamed because he recognizes he's been entirely negligent of Z's loyalty, his love, his internal life. He's acted entitled to his friend's adoration.
The author describes it in these highly visceral terms. Shame flooded him immediately like seawater filling a lung. It's a moment of near drowning in self-recognition.
He realizes that his search for this external, grand meaning has blinded him to the genuine, immediate meaning available right there, through mutual support and friendship.
The reconciliation happens in Prospect Park, but it's accompanied by this strange, surreal, almost religiously charged shift in the environment. It's as if the world itself acknowledges their internal healing.
Yeah, the sources describe this sudden, intense burst of natural phenomena. Trees erupting into bloom, strange music, and great cracking sounds filling the air, the ground heating up, lavender buds and exotic flowers appearing out of nowhere. It's a moment of magical realism that signals this profound internal change.
And in this heightened, altered state, Cyrus finally finds clarity in Z's presence.
He realizes that Z really saw Cyrus, really heard him beneath all his beneaths. And this acceptance, this recognition of his messy, fractured, unmartyred self, offered unconditionally by his friend, that is the real unearned grace Cyrus had been searching for all along.
It's found in the amongness, not in the solitary heroic death.
That's it, exactly.
This realization of his fundamental hollowness and the search for what to fill it with brings Cyrus back to an old Muslim fairy tale he knows about Satan and Adam.
Cyrus recalls the story where Satan, before Adam is fully solidified, passes right through Adam's body and emerges on the other side laughing, proclaiming this profound spiritual realization. He's all empty, all hollow.
And that tale just addresses the core human struggle, doesn't it? We're born empty, and we spend our entire lives desperately trying to fill that hollow with something.
With booze, with drugs, with art, or with the idea of God or martyrdom.
But the filling, as Zhang suggests, is often messy and multifaceted. She talks about how her love for Roya, her sons, and art all just washed together. She says, Tintoretto makes me think of my youngest boy. O'Keeffe makes me think of my oldest.
There is no singular, clean, philosophical answer. The meaning is a complex mosaic, which reflects Orchidée's earlier metaphor of the shattered mirrors.
I think we need to slow down and really appreciate the profound anthropological image that the source material ends on, because it completely redefines the meaning of civilization and the meaning of Cyrus's life.
The sources suggest that the first artifact of civilization wasn't a tool for murder, not a weapon of conquest, not even a tool for efficiency, but rather a human femur found in Madagascar that had healed from a bad fracture.
In the animal world, a broken leg means inevitable death. You either starve or you get eaten. A healed fracture is evidence of something revolutionary.
It demonstrates that one person supported another's long recovery. They fed them, they protected them, they cleaned their wound. The author argues that civilization is augured not by an instrument of murder, but by a fracture bound, a bit of food brought back for another.
And that is the ultimate conclusion for Cyrus. His purpose isn't in achieving some magnificent final act of meaning. It's in the slow, messy, long-term work of binding a fracture his own, or Z's. He finally recognizes that his purpose is in living with and supporting his friend, being the one who brings back the food.
The heroic act is the tedious, unglamorous, sustained support required for mutual survival. It's the absolute opposite of the Icarus plunge. It is the mule plowing on even if a boy just fell out of the sky.
We started this session with Cyrus seeking this dramatic, splashless departure to knife into the pool without a ripple. But the ultimate truth, revealed through his mother's survival and his friend's enduring love, is that life is full of messy, unavoidable splashes.
The goal is not ethical purity or grand action built on constructed absence, like avoiding murder or theft, which are just simple omissions. The core challenge is making something, being the chisel, being an agent of change, and recognizing that love is a room that simply appears when you step into it. The meaning he was looking for was never in that magnificent death, but in the amongness of the present.
That amongness, that realization that you are not alone in your fractured existence, that is the true, unearned grace he was given all along.
It is. The meaning was found in the refusal of the dramatic narrative.
Thank you for joining us for this session on the nature of grace, martyrdom, and the fractured self.
Orchid Arroyo's final written words, they reject the grotesque reduction of her life to disease or death. She insists on getting credit for the simpler joys. She writes, "I used to walk with a sprig of lavender in my pocket, smelling it. I could go to almost any other point in my life, which I believe was as close to time travel as anyone's come." If time travel is merely a scent in your pocket, what overlooked sense or simple routine holds the key to your own past and future?
Martyr reminds us that even in our darkest questions about faith, identity, and belonging, there is a fierce beauty in simply choosing to live. If this book spoke to you, share it with someone who loves stories that cut deep, and subscribe to Stories Aloud for more powerful tales brought to life. Until next time, keep listening.